in the meantime, Niels is doctor, specialist in endocrinology. Well, I think that you're going also to introduce yourself, but we met, this is not the first time that he's in Valencia. I know that he likes to be in Valencia, and we met some years ago. And he's one of the most active people in the e-health arena concerns Europe, being one of the advisors for the European Commission in the e-health. So now, it's your turn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicente. As I said, I won't display my Spanish. It's not for good. It's not for everyday use, I would say. I'm from Denmark, a small, cold country up north. You may have heard of in the school. And as Vicente said, I'll say a little bit about my background. I call my. There's a long title here. And there's also a shorter title, From Diseases to Health, or From Pathology Oriented to Outcome Focused. I'm a physician, as Vicente said. I'm a specialist in endocrinology and internal medicine. I have a conventional clinical and scientific career in biomedicine, ending, at least for now, as head of an evaluation unit for acute admissions, where all the old patients, medical patients came in. And I wondered if I could do something more for them than just being on the hospital, by trying to put myself out of work by using ICT to prevent that they got admitted to the hospital. But I still have license to kill if somebody needs some assistance. For more than 15 years I've been active in ICT for health. I've been employed for a couple of years at the Danish Technological Institute in a unit called AAL. They didn't see the commercial potential in it, so it was closed. I've also been employed in the Ambient Assisted Living Joint Program in Brussels as an administrator of grants. I'm not longer employed there, but to my knowledge, and I know they have employed 7 people to replace me, so there must be something. Anyway, I'm also going to talk a little bit about the Privé project, where I have the pleasure to collaborate with some of the nice and knowledgeable people here in the area. My interpretation of what we are actually here for is that conventional healthcare cannot, by trying to organize the delivery cheaper, smarter, by better coordination and collaboration, whether we are using ICT, use the mass production paradigm to counteract the challenges in health and welfare that the Western societies are facing. We can simply not produce us out of the challenges we have here. So we must turn to another thing. We must learn the patients to take care of themselves. We must help them with them. We must push the knowledge we have in general and about them out to them in a context, so they can take wise decisions about their health out in society. So we will leave the mass production paradigm as depicted in this small Lego figure here, and turn to individual production, personalized production. Customization is the word that the industry uses for this. We must provide ways to organize the consumption of care provisions more intelligent and with a higher impact. This with a higher impact is also noted also in Brussels. So Mr. Barroso, the chairman of the Commission, has said that in 2020 there should be 2 more healthy years for every European citizen. I don't know how he will achieve that. But anyway, it's what is actually, as I will talk a little bit about, is actually a paradigm in Brussels nowadays. So everything is directed against this, to serve this purpose. So forming your microcluster at this moment, where you have so much competence and so many varieties of knowledge, is very in context with what is going on in Europe nowadays, and that can probably also give some funding for the microcluster. I have a few slides which is actually official European Union slides. They are from a presentation. This is not totally condensed yet, so it may change, but it will condense in a few months. And there's a lot of acronyms and things flying around. For the first thing, there will be no 8th framework program. It will be called Horizon 2020, but it's the same, but it will be called something else. It's also called the Common Strategic Framework. So there will be no 7th framework, 8th framework to after the 7th framework, which lasts for 1.5, maybe 2 years now. And there will be introduced several new things. We have here European Innovation Partnerships on Active and Healthy Aging, which has this horrible acronym that I have put up here. And that is the mechanism that should give 2 more healthy years to the Europeans. It's seen as a triple win in Brussels for Europe, enable European citizens to lead healthy, active and independent lives until old age, improving the sustainability and efficiency of social and healthcare systems, developing and deploying innovative solutions, thus fostering competitiveness and market growth. Nobody can disagree in this, of course, but these are the visions that they will try to put forward. They see that you should support older people, this healthy aging, although it doesn't say at which age you could age healthy. They mean that it should be older age. It's more or less implicit. And you could support older people at work, staying longer and work harder. So in the community and at home. And health is a large part of this ambient assisted living that they would like to create. This healthy and active aging, as this is the acronym again here, another combination of letters, is innovation in prevention and early diagnosis, innovation in integrated care, and innovation in active and independent living. So you see that health implicit plays a large role in it. There's communication and awareness also. It will be put into, there will be created an overhead of the instruments that the European Union is having now. These instruments will be the same. There will be programs that the silos of the European Union and the directorates and the units that you use to address will be the same. But there will be a coordination and overlay of this active and healthy partnerships. It's also called a flagship for active and healthy aging partnerships, and it is called, it's also an item of what's called the digital agenda. So there's a lot of words running around here for the same things. I won't go into details. If anybody wants some details, I may be able to provide them offline afterwards. And I'm not an official European Union official at all. So, but there will be created this time to market access here and policy areas. What is new is that they will try to persuade the member state to make this joint program initiatives. That will be a very broad program that will be financed more than 50% from the member states. That's to try to ease the burden of the European Union money box there in a way. They have already some joint program initiatives, including the ambient assisted living joint program I was talking about. They will try to give the member states more say in here, but it will also give more bureaucracy, of course. The ambient assisted living joint program, that's a nightmare to administer, because there's 23 members and there's the European Commission, and they all want to do what they want to do, of course. So there will be a lot of bureaucracy, but anyway, these programs will probably be broader and not so specific. as the calls that are now. Then there will be the usual FP7 Health, FP7 eHealth, continued in this Horizon 2020. There will be these competitive and innovation programs in ICT and in eHealth. And then they will try to provide some kind of a bridge to structural funding and the European Investment Bank. They recognize that there's a gap between when you have finished the project and then they need to mature the products for a market. And the healthcare market is very complicated, so this maturation is very complicated. They realize that there's a problem in this maturation. How this will be installed, nobody knows. So my preliminary conclusion, and it's my personal conclusion, the areas of e-health and ambient assisted living are attracting increasingly European attention and funding. No new instrumental procedures will be introduced. Integration of health prevention and AL activities are anticipated in this broad joint programs. A bureaucratic overhead should ensure a steady course toward a common vision and accrue to member states co-funding. And on the other hand, it might give a better flow from idea to product to the market. We don't know, but it could do. I'll talk now a little bit about what I else have been doing, and I'll include a lot of information from this project called PREVE. So I'll start by acknowledging the partners in the PREVE, which was the VTT, which is a Finnish technical university. It was the department in Tampere. That's an even more cold country than Denmark. Then there was Aarhus University. That was me. I'm not the whole university, but that was me. Then there was the San Raffaele Hospital. This is a private hospital in Milan, and having very nice ideas and doing health in many ways, in awkward ways. For instance, they have a zoo with kind animals close to the pediatric department, because it alleviates the pain of the pediatric patients and the pediatric cancer patients to have contact with friendly animals. So that's part of their pain treatments, to have a zoo outside the pediatric department. And then there was this universal unit UPV. Whether they have a zoo or not, I'm not completely sure. So maybe we can find out later. I don't saw the zoo on your slides here. Okay, we have a website. It's called preve.eu.org. It's still active. The project has ended, but it's still active. The idea of the project was to give direction for ICT research in disease prevention. And before I'm going into what disease prevention is, it could maybe be instrumental just to stop a little bit and discuss what is a disease. WHO is in no doubt of what a disease is. They have an international classification of diseases. We are now at the ICD-10. International Classification of Diseases, edition number 10, and in there all the diseases has a number. They are grouped and they are numbered and things like that, and that's the basis of many of classifications, including it's also included in the HL7 classification. It's based on the classification of this of the death causes, which was developed from 1850 to 1900. So it's rather old, both in its structure and it's how it perceived diseases. I'll come back to that. Maybe the time was to make it new international congresses. You see, at that time it was the same. There was this speaker and the rest was sleeping. Actually, the father of this classification was Leonardo da Vinci and his anatomical studies. At that time, you had the idea that every disease could be attributed to an anatomical lesion. And that gives the structure of the ICD-10. And that has continued all the way up. And since it is a death cause from the 18th or the early 19th century, then it is gross pathology. So it's macroscopical lesions that is actually the diseases, and it's discrete macroscopic simple disease lesions. And that fitted very, very well in the start of the computers. You see here the punch card, where you could actually group all the diseases on the punch cards here. At that time, computer science was a respectable profession, as you see. There was ample of space, and people were well dressed. No pizzas, no cola, no nothing. So, but that has also, of course, changed a little bit. That was put onto the punch card, all these diseases, and then you could sort, group, and code all the diseases very nicely. So the idea was to take reality and reduce complexity. So you could compute it, so you could do number crunching on it. And it has given a lot more insight in diseases, disease causes, disease progression, and abilities in treatment, but it's still on group level. It is very much still on group level. It's not on the individual level. And the problem is with many of these classifications is that the diseases have moved away from the original death cause definition. I'll come back to that a little later. But this coding on group level is still used in most electronic health records, and that's part of the abstract reason why they are not functioning 100% good in the clinic, because it's very difficult to actually bridge it from the group level to the individual level. And that's what I'm going to discuss the rest of my presentation. You may agree or not, that's okay. I don't think this general computing paradigm would be good to proceed with the health endeavor that will, especially when we like to cater for the European Commission's wish of taking health out in society and let people take care of themselves. So it will only, if we don't acknowledge that we, of course, have to continue with what we have been doing until now. It's very good. It gives insight. It gives ideas. It gives abilities. Then we have to set up a parallel track of computing of how we can do on the individual. Then, if we don't do that, we'll only end in endless discussion of semantics, and nobody wants to do that. We must turn to what I call non-complexity reducing computing, and I'll give some examples of that in a while. We start by a very intriguing example. This is simulation of the cardiac progression of electricity in a diseased heart when you have introduced various pharmacological compounds. It's from a European Union project called PREDICT, where you actually were able to simulate single ion channel flows of ions and on an individual patient basis. It needed very, very large computers, but that could also, you could simulate from an ECG taking on the surface. They would try to reverse simulate to the lesion in the heart. And that is non-complexity reducing computing, where you really have to do number crunching. You have to do modern things like data mining and pattern recognition and things like that, because this is on an individual level. It's the flavor of these things I would like to introduce. As a paradox, actually, WHO also had a definition of health, which is completely different from the definition of diseases. Health is defined as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease and infirmity. So, of course, you can have controversy about what is complete and what is not complete. But anyway, it's taking the standoff in this definition and leave the old paradigm of complexity reducing computing for diseases, then I think we should move to non-complexity reduced computing for health and wellness. So, can we preserve health, cognitive and physical functions? If we take, can we service Mr. Barroso in this field? Can computers do good for Mr. Barroso? Yeah, I'll divide this talk in two areas. One where I look on the medical evidence, and one of what I look on what we've done in ICT so far, and then I will suggest what we're going to do in ICT later. So the rest of the talk will be the evidence and the foundation, how to orchestrate it, and how to orchestrate the IT, and potential business model, since we want to make money out of it. Or Alexander wants to make money out of it. Are there any evidence in the health division? Yes, we looked at that in the Private project, and if you have this matrix here, it's called the Danish matrix. There's relations between tobacco smoking and these conditions. There's relations between diet and these conditions. There's relations between alcohol consumption and these relations. And if you group the whole thing together, it's going to be a very complex picture. And this, of course, calls for modeling. It's called for non-complexity reduced computing. It calls for that you can actually also combine these things. If you look at these conditions over here, the conditions are the 8 most prevalent diseases and conditions, at least in Denmark. So this is what takes up the burden of our healthcare system. You notice that most of them are chronic diseases, and many of them are lifestyle related. And some of them are, in the old-fashioned ICD way, very interrelated. So somebody consider diabetes as a cardiac disease characterized by elevated blood glucose. Because if you don't get your diabetes right, you will end up with a heart disease. If you have diabetes type 2, you won't notice, that's not a problem. But it will really hurt when you get the cardiac disease later on. So diseases are mingling in a way, and there's a lot of comorbidity, especially in the lifestyle-related diseases. So it's a complicated picture. Can people do something themselves? Yes, from all these 8 diseases or conditions, there are evidence that people can do something themselves. I've just taken one example here because time is limited. It's a cardiovascular disease, and it's a polymeal. If you drink a little wine, have a little fish, eat some dark chocolate, fruits and vegetables, garlic, almonds a day, you have a combined effect, if you summarize the effect, of 76% in reduction in cardiovascular disease. That's compatible to a multi-pharmacological intervention. You can argue that you cannot summarize these cardiovascular risks, and increasing evidence in foodstuff, berries and things like that, that is good for your health in different ways, and are actually coming in. So you can do something for yourself if you could get this information in context down in the supermarket. Another example I will take of chronic diseases is a very famous diabetes study called the DCCT, Diabetes Control and Complication Trial. It's a very old study. You can see it's published in a famous journal here in 1993. But nevertheless, numerous studies have shown it for also numerous of the chronic diseases. They took about 1,450 patients and divided them in 2 groups. And they were randomized, and the one they gave the conventional treatment, and the other one they gave a personalized treatment, where they actually was coaching these patients as much as possible. It was, of course, before before the use of computers and handheld devices and everything. Was it the insulin, the coaching, the proactive care model, or the personification that did the job, or was it because these people were much better out and had much less complications, much less late complication of diabetes that did the job? Yes, of course it was all of them, except maybe the insulin, because if you took the amount of insulin in total units, it was exactly the same in the two groups. It was distributed different in the two groups, but it was exactly the same amount of insulin. So I tend to conclude that it is the proactive care model, the knowledge, the education, the training, what do you call it, capacity building. I never understood the difference of all these words, although if you have a 14-year-old daughter, I think you would prefer that she have sexual education instead of sexual training. But anyway, that's the only way I can. So ICT for health until now. Let's look on telemedicine first. There's a large overview, systematic overview of quality and safety of healthcare. They identified, it's a meta-study, 53 systematic reviews and 55 other papers that they used. And their conclusions were, we found that despite support from policymakers, there was relatively little empirical evidence to substantiate many of the claims in relation to these technologies. Important best practice guideline and effective development deployment of strategies are lacking. And there was a relative few solutions, but they won't travel. This is, of course, old data because it's a review on reviews, and things have progressed, as you will hear in the next speaker, very much since these data come in. But the conclusion is that there's a large gap between the postulated and empirical demonstrated benefit of e-health technologies, and there's no evidence for the cost effectiveness of these solutions. So the conclusion could be we should do something else or do it in another way. The present digital health picture is like this. We have a supply side where we have, you can go from 100% citizen to 100% patient. And you have a demand side which is here depicted more or less about your biological age from 0 to 100. And then we have clusters of e-health, so to say. We have telemedicine over here, and we have ambient assisted living. Telemedicine, you are 100% patient, you're just outside in society. AAL, you're not 100% patient, but most of these solutions have been deployed to people that are so old that they have no real benefit from them, and they are so expensive at the moment that they will not really do. And then there's prevention, which we were looking at in the Privé project, and it's a rather lonely out here because prevention is something that is when you are very much closer to being 100% citizen and far away from being 100% patient. So how do we combine those things and try to, we looked at what we are doing actually in medicine nowadays, and we're doing what we're actually doing in ICT nowadays. We have these two axes. Up here you have the medical axis. When my father, he was also a doctor, when he was practicing, the citizen was an object. Here, when I was practicing, the citizen was intended to be a proactive subject. Likewise, in the computer, when it started in the punch card area, the user was operator, it was expert system, it was corporate centered, and now it's user that are real users, it's layman systems, and it's individual centered. And if we take the paradigm that I was talking about before and we'll try to mature it into model and concepts, that was actually what we did in Privé. What we were looking at is, of course, some of the buzzwords here, and if we could create what we call the citizen as co-producer of health. That could be in disease prevention, disease compensation, disease cure, assisted living, anything else. And we looked at it. Up here you have all the P's that always are in high-level talks and papers. This is prevention. This is personalization. This is what else can we do with P's? Proactive, personalized, everything that you can imagine. And out here you have all the other things, the inclusion, that it should be for everybody, the technology. So this should be combined in a way. And that could be combined in what we call a digital health continuum. This digital health continuum goes from hospital, where you're 100% patient, through telemedicine, until lifestyle, where you are 100% citizen. Through chronic disease management, ambient-assisted living, prevention, and lifestyle management. The impact of the contemporary health provision service model is mostly, of course, here, and there's nearly no business model for lifestyle prevention and ambient-assisted living, as I was talking about. And maybe we could create this co-production of health paradigm, where it would have the most impact in the chronic disease management, because people tend to care most about their health if they are not healthy. If they feel healthy, they are not caring so much about that. So could we make synergies in here? And this synergism would be very welcome, because 70% of chronic diseases are preventable. 70% of healthcare activities are spent on chronic diseases, although the hospital systems and the installations and the doctors are all trained for acute diseases. We work on chronic diseases more or less only. Chronic non-communicable diseases or conditions are much more prevalent among older citizens, and synergism of pharmaceuticals and co-production of health have potential of a high impact in the older segment of society. So we should make a parallel healthcare delivery model using the digital health continuum. We are, of course, up against very large forces here. Here's depicted by the Marlboro Man. He was the icon of advertising and good lifestyle in the '53. He died of lung cancer. The Marlboro don't tell you that. Actually, his horse also died from lung cancer due to passive smoking. But nobody tells you that. George Clooney is still drinking martini with the nice ladies here, although he has turned more to coffee, I've seen. But that's probably, you can be paid to do everything, of course. So we have advertising, we have good lifestyle. The healthy lifestyle are not hip at the moment, but they are becoming hip, and they are coming more and more hip, and that will amplify the digital health continuum. And people are asking more and more for health application. There's, in the iPod store, there's more than 1,000 health applications, and most of them are downloaded once and then never used, because they are of so low quality and provide no way of individualism. So we can do better from the professionals than what is done from the amateurs out there. There are no service model yet on ambient-assisted living. We can talk about that another day. There's at least in chronic disease, impact and medical evidence and relations are established, and personal contexts are established. So my persuasion is that we should isolate telemedicine over here. That is for professionals. That is hospital out in society. Also because special legal and regulatory issues apply. And if this fails, if this fails over here, the doctor goes to jail. So that's okay. But of course, if the patient is not taking good of the care of himself, I won't go to jail. So we have to separate the telemedicine and the rest of the digital health continuum. We use the same software, we use the same hardware, we use the same communication protocols, we use everything else the same. But legal and liability issues are separated. So we have prevention and lifestyle management in the over. We create what, in a way, like the microcluster you have created here, we create this co-production ecosystem. An ecosystem is something that is cross-sectional to the organization, but around the same idea. We have the usual suspects in healthcare over here, and then we supplement them with some other members of the ecosystem, the supermarket, the baker, the butcher, and so on. I'll come back to that. Co-production, the formal definition I make here is a term that I use to represent the health consideration and knowledge can be embedded and utilized in any activity in society, and that synergies between professional healthcare, self-care, informal care, and commodity will be turned into health added value. Co-production takes place in an ecosystem which is cross-sectional to the formal organization of society. In the ecosystem are formed value networks that share information, resources, and can generate the value proposition that are the basis of the business model that fund the services delivered and consumed by the citizens, which are not places anymore. Actually, WHO has recognized this, and in my very recent paper they talk about co-production and see it as one of the main pillars that should carry on. I was in Sweden a few weeks ago, and then we defined co-production much more operative, and maybe that's better than the high-level definition I gave before. Co-production means plugging into a service the knowledge, energy, and commitment of its users and those close to them who really understand it and care about the service. This means users and communities as assets, not obstacles. In this way, co-production services can produce more of the outcomes that really matter to the users. This is the Swedish social agency, Socialstyrelsen, called in Swedish. Skip this. So, can we create an infrastructure where this ecosystem can provide information, knowledge, and data to a personal device that can service the patient? I'll give some examples of that. We have some building blocks to do this. This is what's called the machine room of citizen as co-producer of health here. We have the political and social-economic factors in society that affect the co-producers, and it also affects choice architectures. What that is, I'll come back to. But this gives input to the models that is running in this health GPS or digital avatar or personal guidance system or whatever you would call it. And the data, information, and knowledge is actually coming from conventional legacy systems. There should be security and ID and everything else, but that can be done. Choice architectures embody the regulation policies and incentives at social level. For instance, in France, it is not allowed to set up a fast food restaurant closer than 500 meters to a school. So that's a choice architecture. So we move the fast food. This is not the case in the United States, where the fast food restaurants actually are set up inside the schools. But anyway, and that gives some problems. Co-production, ecosystem, value network, business models are services are consumed where services are delivered and consumed by citizens. ICT enable and support this. What we should do is like the GPS more or less. Health is an analog problem, and going from A to B, you have, which is also an analog problem. You make an analog digital transformation of the problem and put it into your GPS. It makes some calculations of how you could get there, and it spits out an advice also by transforming this advice to the analog world, digital analog transformation, and display it on a map. So can we do the same thing for health? Can we make the health GPS in this way? Then we must be clever as professionals to do this AD transformation and DA transformation correctly, and be able to have the models infused with the knowledge. In the GPS, it's the knowledge about the geography. Here, it's the knowledge about the health. We did an experiment when I was at the Danish Technological Institute. I'll give you 5 minutes, okay? I'll give you a short overview here. We are in a small Danish fishing town called Skagen in the north of Jutland. The fishing has been abandoned due to the European Union regulations. So this is a museum ship. We are in the year 2017. This museum has, for being so realistic as possible, a seagull on the top here, but it's a Wi-Fi antenna in disguise, of course. Here we have Karen. Karen is 7 years, so she will be born in a few months. She has diabetes, and when she approaches this sign, it rolls down to her height, displays the menu, and communicate with her digital avatar, which is inside the teddy bear that she is carrying. Inside, she can get advice of what to eat, the exercise she can do afterwards. It's interfaced with the weather forecast, because walking in wet sand is more cumbersome and exercise than walking in dry sand. This was put into a model like this. And actually, we made the experiment, and it got into the Danish news broadcast. It was running on a small PC computer here, and we had the model running here, and we are inside a butcher in Skagen, and he has digitized all his recipes. And then by RFID, information was transferred to the computer, and the model was calculating how this small boy here with the glasses, but also with diabetes, should actually behave. And we had a butcher and baker, a restaurant, and things like that. And it made forecast on the model-based forecast on the glucose. So what do? We have the infrastructure, we have the HL7, we have the communication protocols, we have the Continue Health Alliance, we have all the things down here in the infrastructure that actually can enable this. We need to set up a platform and databases, and especially curated databases with information that the patients would, for example, foodstuff and things like that. We need to create an app store on top of it, and this virtual individual model that can put everything together. So, what is healthcare actually selling? We're selling knowledge. Knowledge comes in three forms. It's just to display the three forms, I have a small analogy here. This in storytelling, we have the action, the plot, the storyline down here in the runtime area. Up here we have the stereotypes, the story type. It could be a criminal novel, and the stereotypes, it's always the butler that did it. The philosophy up here, hate, love and death, and it's beautifully depicted in The Name of the Rose of Umberto Eco, which is actually a criminal novel of somebody murdered in an Italian monastery, but it's also about something about poverty and wealth depicted by the Vatican representative. There's also stereotypes like the Spanish Inquisition there, and the hunchback. And it is, of course, also with some love and hate and sex. Maybe if you put more sex into e-health, it would go better. It's also about knowledge, and actually it's also about humor. And the whole plot is in there is, would people not believe the power of the church if humor was released? Because there was a lot of books where there was humor and making fun of the Vatican. So actually this guy, Jörg here, he burns down a medieval library with all this humor thing. And you could take, so the story has three levels, and the information has three levels, and the knowledge has three levels. And so we also have in medicine. And you could take this novel also as would the internet actually break down the power of the society, of the authorities in society, and maybe it's on the brink of doing that. So, what is a healthcare provision? We take this knowledge, which we have in three forms, we pack it in healthcare provisions. What's a healthcare provision? We use technology, we use manual work, we use knowledge, and we combine it all with teamwork. Delivering healthcare and care provision in such a co-production ecosystem could be that we deliver the knowledge, and actually a new role for the universities the microclusters here could actually be to build the evidence-based knowledge, and it will give you direct access to the end customers, the patient, the end users, and things like that. The manual work could be done by professional healthcare, self-care, informal carers, or actually the commodity actors, the butcher and the baker. Teamwork, communication, support for the digital health continuum by application store, and the technology, it's obvious, it's social technology, Spec 2.0, or whatever you call it. The whole system should be built on openness, sharing, integrity of the partners involved, as described very much in this book, which also described the potential business models that you could actually use in such an ecosystem. It's called micro-economics, I can't pronounce it, but anyway. And interdependence, that's a characteristic, both of the legal and security. So we'll have to leave also the legal and ethical paternity that the patients are not able to take care of themselves. Here they should take care of themselves, and they are liable. That can be put into business framework. This is from a guy called Osterwalder, where you identify the value flows and the key actors and things like that, and you put it into this, and you can make actually a very nice business model for this. So the message to take home is to serve personalized individual health needs. We should create a parallel information flow servicing an ecosystem with model-based non-complexity reducing computing in which health is co-produced. I'm sorry, it's not that good. In other words, we must train the patients to take care of themselves. This could create new business opportunities and lower the total cost of healthcare, provide morbidity compression. That's a management word for 2 more healthy, active years. You should persuade the patients to live healthy longer so they won't burden the healthcare system before the very last years of their life. How you persuade patients to do that, I don't know. I've tried for a lifetime. It's not working. So, but that's called morbidity compression, and that's actually what Mr. Barroso would like to be. More healthy, in my opinion. So, ladies and gentlemen, have a happy age.
Many thanks, Dr. Niels, for this presentation and this very inspiring presentation, really. For myself, I have taken that people care more about their health only when they are unhealthy. So this is one, I think that this is the leitmotif of the thing.